Ladies and gentlemen, have your attention and we're going to get rolling. Welcome to Prevue InFocus Live, co-sponsored by iMeet. Today we've got an amazing program and we're going to talk about one of our favorite subjects, food, and how food relates to the MICE industry. Specifically, creating culinary for meetings, from impact chefs to unique settings. We have a $100 gift certificate, Amex card that we'll draw for at the end of the program, so make sure that your card is in the loop, and Matt will make sure that you have your card there, and we'll do a drawing at the end. So let's get started with our amazing panel, and we have on our panel today, first of all, on my immediate right, your left, Greg Oates, and he is with Prevue Magazine, executive editor. Greg, would you say a few words about your background?
Hi everyone. First of all, thank you for coming, joining us today. I'm the executive editor. We're here.
Higher? Yep, there you go.
Is that better? That's good? No? How's that?
Yay!
All right, first of all, thanks everyone for coming by and joining us today. My name is Greg Oates. I'm the executive editor of Prevue Magazine since its inception. Before that, I was the managing editor with Prevue's sister magazine, Recommend, which handles the travel agent trade. So I've pretty much spent my entire career writing about the travel trade.
Thank you, Greg. Glad to have you with us. And next up, we have Mark SOTELINO. And Mark is general manager of Café BaBaReeba restaurant here in Chicago. Mark, welcome, and could you say a few words about your background?
Sure. Let me try doing this as well. Hello. So my name is Mark Sully. I'm the operator of Café BaBaReeba restaurant. We're the first, and in my eyes, the premier Spanish restaurant in Chicago. Been there 27 and a half years. I'm actually half Spanish. My father is from Galicia in Spain, so I have definitely a sentimentality towards Spain and kind of a bias towards Spain. But my father is actually the original chef from Spain of our restaurant, and I've kind of taken over since then and been in the industry my entire life, and always had a passion for Spanish wine and food and the culture. So glad to be here.
Glad you're here, Mark. By the way, I've been there, and the food is delicious.
Thank you.
Next to Mark, we have James FELDMAN. He's well known in the industry as well. CITE member, CPIM, CPT, and MIP. And he's known as the man that says shift happens, change management expert, James. James, a few words about your background.
I've been eating for most of my life. I've been drinking for most of my life. I got serious about food and wine when I was 12 years old. Started a wine collection at the age of 12, grew up to about 17,000 bottles. I consult the restaurants, and most of my clients bring us in because we're innovative. We think differently, and they always know that they're going to get a gastronomical experience. I was one of the first groups to do groups in Napa Valley and Sonoma, and have continued to eat and drink my way through most of the world.
We're glad you're with us, and stay tuned. We look forward to learning more about your background. And last but not least, certainly, is Jorge Rubio Navarro. He is Director of Tourist Office of Spain, Chicago. Welcome back. You've been with us before, but for those who don't know, a little bit about your background, Jorge.
Good morning. Thank you, Virginia. I'm glad to be again in the preview, in the InFocus Live preview series, and thank you for considering us to be as a panelist here. I've been working in the National Tourist Organization of Spain since 1998, and in my head office I was in charge for all the IT development and marketing online until 2007, where I leave my born city, Madrid, and started working in my office, in our office in Toronto. And I was there until 2 years ago, and I'm now the director of tourist office here, promoting and marketing the MICE industry in the USA for trying to convince you how amazing is our country, how our gastronomy, and I've been also eating and drinking since I was born.
Jorge, glad
Thank
you're
you.
with us, and certainly Spain has some delicious cuisine and also some amazing chefs, so we'll talk about those in a minute or two. But first of all, we are now certainly a globe of foodies. And no matter where you go in this world, you'll find foodies. So we've got a panel of experts here. Let's ask them the first critical question. What do you see as the major trends in the culinary field, specifically for the MICE industry? Let me start with you, Greg, since you have an overview and you're with Prevue magazine.
All right, thank you. Starting off, I think the thing we're seeing most is food's becoming more social. So, say traditionally you've had a group in a ballroom, everyone's at tables, everyone's there for 2 or 3 hours talking to sort of the same people in their little area. I think people are moving on from that. People are moving on from that a little bit. So we're seeing food and beverage events become more social where, for instance, there are some hotel companies now where every new hotel restaurant, you'll see the kitchen out in the restaurant. So you're creating that engagement with the chefs and with the clientele. We're also seeing where a lot of groups will do, drinks and maybe an appetizer in a bar setting with a mixology demonstration, and then moving into a restaurant or moving into a ballroom for the main courses. And that does a few things. One, most importantly, is that you're interacting with different people during the whole event. We're also seeing that, say, with progressive dining offsite, where instead of, if you're doing a dine around, instead of groups going to a bunch of different restaurants, you'll see everyone go to different restaurants and then switch for each course. Again, with the whole idea of being more social, meeting more people, engaging with more people. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of is the whole hyper-local idea, where you're really experiencing the destination with through the types of food specific to that destination. We've all talked a lot about the whole farm to fork and local food and how that helps the community, but really there's another benefit to that, which I think has gained a lot of traction. It's just that if you're coming to a destination for a meeting or incentive to really feel like you're experiencing that destination through the types of food. So if we've seen now where if you're even for a large 10,000 people and everyone's around, bringing in the chefs to talk about their food or having collateral materials to talk about where the food came from, what they do to be special, but just creating a higher level of engagement with the local community.
Great points, Greg. Very, very acute and right on. Let's shift over for a little bit and see what James has to say about this, especially given his background in working with both the MICE industry and restaurants and food facilities. James.
Your first clue should be to look at what's going on in the restaurant industry in general. The second part of it is to remember that most of the people today are ordering out. They're not cooking the way they used to. I live in a high-rise where people put in $100,000 kitchens and never take the plastic out of their dishwashers or actually turn on the ovens. It's all for resale. So when people come to an event, whether it's an incentive or a group or a meeting, they expect to be fed, but more importantly, they expect to be entertained and they expect to be educated. So one of the more important things is the takeaway value. Someone tastes a product, give them the recipe, give them a link, give them take-home samples. One of the problems you see in a lot of these events is that you can't taste everything because the portions are too big. Make smaller portions and do more grazing and allow people to order more and more so that they get the experience. The second part is that if you look at the trends in restaurants, you see more communal dining, more people doing family service rather than the standard plated meal. I'm not a big fan of buffets because a buffet is typically a lot of food waste. I am much more of a fan of, here are small portions, much like what Café BaBaReeba does, so that you have a broader taste experience. The last part is to humanize the chef, because everybody thinks the chef is up on this pulpit and somehow comes up with this magic ingredient and magic recipe that can't be replicated. And often it's the simple things. I'll give you a quick example. One of the big restaurants in New York did painted plates, and they made a lot of money with painted plates. Well, the truth is, if you can paint, you can make a painted plate. But people didn't understand how to do that. So the first thing I did was talk to the chef and found out that he used a reduction of balsamic vinegar. So you take balsamic vinegar, you put it on a low heat, you reduce it down to a paste, you then take a paintbrush, paint the plate, put the plate into the freezer, and now you've got a painted plate. When people can walk away from an event and replicate those experiences at home, your takeaway value becomes innovative, and indeed, shift has happened.
So you're talking about really, in addition to ROI, which we'll get to in a little bit, ROE, which is return on entertainment.
Yes.
And experience. So
Correct.
You get a combo hit for that.
Again, remember that most people have come to this event hungry. You don't want to disappoint them, but they also want to be entertained and educated. So those are really the three things: eat, entertainment, and education.
Thank you, James. Let's shift for a moment to a larger view, and that is the country of Spain. Jorge, any comments along this line?
We are seeing a little bit, we agree with that perception, because we see more demand on show cooking demonstration, and even something also from the beginning, from the products. More demand on market tours, especially in very, very known markets like Valencia or San Sebastian. The people are demanding to go first to the market to see the produce, to see how the fresh product of the ingredients, and also in combination with, in our country, especially in our country, in combination always with the wine pairing, wine tasting. That's a very good educational session, and also like the people love to participate in the team building activities. How to prepare something, how to prepare a small set of tapas, how to prepare. The people love to participate. And another trend we are seeing, like our traditional cuisine is the groups are demanding the traditional cuisine with the twist or a different point of view, innovative point of view from the chefs, and different touch. A small portion, I agree, a small portion, but at the same time, innovative, new kind of enjoy or that's kind of.
Thank you, Jorge. Let's take another step and drill down a little bit. We've seen sort of the overview of trends and food explosion opportunities, and look at the restaurant side.
Okay. Well, I couldn't agree more with Greg and James and Jorge as far as the trends being social, small plates, and my job and the job of restaurants and the actual spaces is to be ambassadors of the culture and of whatever you're trying to present. So for us, we very much want to tap into that and make sure that you guys get your return on investment and that people come away with a unique experience. So these days, especially in our environment of media and entertainment, more and more people are watching. Some of the top-rated shows, for instance, on TV are a travel channel, food channel. People love watching the chefs. People love watching people going to Spain and watch Anthony Bourdain and his whole take on traveling and Batali and these types of things. And they very much want to be in that. People get excited by that. It's pardon the expression, but food porn basically. So what people want is that same experience, but for themselves. So our job as ambassadors, we definitely want to stick with the small plates and the social interaction, and that's all what Spain is all about. Spain is passionate about food and wine. These gentlemen were saying, and I would wholeheartely agree, we've been drinking since 12, and that's why we're more fun. But basically, in like I said, in Spain, when you go to meetings and when the business is a lot more, in my opinion, informal and social in Spain and Europe in general than it might be in conventions like we're having now in Chicago, and it's just a little bit more social. So our experience is that we need to give the meeting planners and the clientele something to walk away from, that they're different from what they've experienced before, something with a little Spanish twist, so something they might be used to, but put our little twist on it, make sure they walk away with having the same experience that they might get from watching something on the Travel Channel or whatever it might be. So we're going to show you a flamenco dance show. We're going to teach you how to make paella. We're going to teach you how to make sangria. You'll drink sangria. That's the main portion. It makes everything more fun. But the wine and everything is all part of that. Having our chef out there and having celebrity chefs or guest chefs from Spain come and give you that experience is really what you will remember. People come in to restaurants and they'll certainly remember having good service and great customer service experience, but you'll remember the food, and you'll remember, if you haven't drank too much sangria, hopefully you'll remember everything else as well, and that's what you come away with. So like I said, we're just ambassadors of that, and I think Spain is the culture of Spain is something we're always trying to promote, yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
By the way, if you have questions, please come to the mic and we'll identify you, and you can ask the question of the panel. So let's continue. Top chefs, celebrity chefs, what has been your experience in working with them in the MICE industry? Certainly, Spain has a plethora of top chefs. Jorge?
Yes, really that. I don't know, because we have maybe the biggest concentration of top chefs now in the world, in our country. We have 140 Michelin star restaurant inside the country.
14?
140.
140.
With at least one star.
At least one or more Michelin star chefs
And
in Spain.
seven of them have 3 Michelin stars. 7 of them.
With 3 or more Michelin stars.
That's incredible, big concentration.
Great for high-end incentive, correct?
The magazine restaurant has named now the El Celler de Can Roca in the Girona area, north of Barcelona, like the best restaurant in the world. And also they have dedicated a special movie of that now. It's a new movie. And the trends now, everybody knows Ferran Adrià was the number 1 top chef in the world. Ferran Adrià has created a special foundation, more in the research area, and also inviting the MICE groups can use that foundation or the room or the expertise in a special, the special venues they are providing, they are offering to the MICE group. And all these top chefs, they not only have the restaurant where you can enjoy and you can enjoy the innovative dishes they are preparing, but also they are more involved now in the catering companies, and they are offering special menus for the MICE industry in all different parts of the Spain, because these 7-star Michelin restaurants are located mainly in the Catalonia area, in the Basque Country, and there are a new one from Quique da Costa in Denia, a small, very nice Mediterranean city south in the Alicante area and the south to Valencia, and it's another 3-star Michelin, and all of them are involved more and more in the catering services for the MICE industry.
Well, and certainly El Bulli, who had his world-famous restaurant, has closed his restaurant, but is opening a foundation, and I believe he's going to open up the foundation for VIP groups. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's for VIP groups, more in the educational, and yes, it's for VIP groups, for sure, yeah.
Greg, you have an overview of many countries. Any insights into celebrity or top chefs and some of your observations?
Okay, a couple things. I had the pleasure of hanging out with some top chefs in Las Vegas. Jean-Georges, Julian Serrano, Chef Massa, 3 Michelin stars. And we hung out in their kitchens and they talked about food, and we prepared a little bite here and there, which is pretty great. But after it was over, all of them said the same thing, and they said it's really not just about the food. They said the food is actually about half of it. The other half is creating the experience, and also just the branding and the marketing and the management. And so if anyone has a chance, a planner is creating an event, and they have a chance to have the chef in there, it's not just about the food. Everyone's going to ask about the food. Everyone's going to ask, how do you make this, how do you make that? And that's all good and fine. But also, if you take the time to ask them, well, how do you manage your team? You know, how do you instill that trust for someone to carry your brand globally? Talk about their branding, how they set themselves apart, because that's really why these chefs are where they're at. Emerald, all these names we know, it's just as much the branding. And I think we're going to get into ROI, ROE later, but if you're working with not just a celebrity chef, but any top chef, create that time to ask those questions, and you'll get a lot more out of it than a recipe or two.
Thank you. Interesting comments, Greg. And Jim?
One of the important things to do with these chefs is remember that they have the same creative flair that you have. If you come in and start dictating to the chef, you're going to get what you always got. What I typically do with the chef is say, if this was your event, how would you plan it? What would you do that's differently? And one of the things that's worked extraordinarily well for us is to put some of the key executives into the kitchen so that they're actually helping create the event, creating the meal. And typically you go to things like sweet, savory with high quality as opposed to large plates, you know, typically what I call a hunk of meat and a pound of potatoes. If you go back and you start to think of it from the end result first, i.e., what's going to be the takeaway value? What's going to be the experience? Can you promote new efficiencies within the organization? Can you address unmet needs? Can you really perform at a consistently high level so that everyone has an experience? You do this because the chef knows what the chef does best. A quick example, we had a meeting in San Antonio, and during the breakouts, they brought out beef jerky. The beef jerky was a phenomenal hit. It wasn't tough. It wasn't spicy. It was just wonderfully prepared. And it became a request at every single breakout to provide more beef jerky. And at the end of the event, I got everybody the recipe. It took a lot of coercing because they were worried that people would steal the recipe and start selling it online, etc., like that. But at the end of the day, everybody got a recipe that started off with take 100 pounds of meat and marinate it for 24 hours. Well, they got what they asked for. I doubt that anybody actually used it, but the takeaway value was very strong. And the last part of that is always give them something to take back to their room or take back for the next day. So typically at the end of the meal, I'll have takeaway chocolates. I'll also introduce something they've never thought of. And we were talking a little bit about food and wine pairing. Pair up some food and wine that you wouldn't normally do. For instance, red wine with chocolate is killer. If you've never had it before, it's an amazing experience. Sweet wines with the strong cheeses. Start to introduce them to something that they would not do on their own. Remember, the definition of an incentive has always been providing something that you couldn't do on your own if you could afford to do it. And that same thing should occur when you start talking about the culinary experiences.
Thank you, Jim. So it's pushing the envelope just a little bit to give people the opportunity to get out of their own box, if you will. Let's take it from the restaurant perspective. We've got a whole group of meeting planners here and around the world who are watching. How best should they work with a restaurant if they want to do a program, a meeting, or an incentive?
Sure.
Let's ask Mark. Mark?
Well, Jim hit on some great points that kind of fall right into that. Our goal in meeting with the clients is that it's very important for us, first of all, to get a one-on-one feel for what the goals are, what they're trying to accomplish, what the setting is. Obviously, the demographic is going to, the demographic and the timing of the event is going to greatly change how we do. So, you know, if we know that it's going to be a more social event where people have been, for instance, in meetings all day and they've been, you know, listening to blowhards like ourselves talk all day, and they need to kind of, that's myself, by the way, not yourselves. if they're coming from that kind of setting all day long and working all day and they need to have more of a release, then we're not going to want to do a formal sit-down or classroom-style seating event. We're going to want to get them to interact more, kind of let loose a little bit, loosen the tie, more of a grazing event where they're going to be able to mingle a little bit more. On the other hand, if they're doing more of a morning or lunch-type meeting and trying to, and our goal is just to give them lunch breaks or to facilitate the meeting process, then it's going to be a different thing entirely. So we very much, myself and my team at the restaurant, are always making sure we're meeting with people one-on-one, letting them look at the event space, give us their thoughts, and then, like you said, kind of push the boundaries. So if they come into the thought process like, we've done 20 of the same meetings and we do this all the time, this is what we usually do, well, why don't we try it this way? Or, since we're obviously, like I said, representing the Spanish culture, we're going to want to twist it just a little bit. Why don't we introduce this element to it? Why don't we introduce that element to it? Do different wine pairings or do something interactive. What we find is there's so much competition, both in the meeting planning industry and also in the restaurants themselves, and both globally and locally in Chicago. People get bored. They need different and new things. They don't want the same stuff over and over and over again. So we need to always be on top of our game and know what the new trends are and do something different and think outside the box. Otherwise, you're going to bore the clientele. So the biggest thing for us is just meeting with the people and getting an idea of their goals and what they want to take away from everything.
Thank you, Mark. I know several people here also have very big meetings besides the small elite incentive meetings. Let's say 10,000 and above. How should you look at food when you're talking about mass numbers? James.
You look at food the same way. You got to feed everybody a meal. I don't get scared by that kind of thing. I see it as a great opportunity. We did an event for 5,000 people. They came in black tie and we served family style. It was totally contrary to what they expected. They loved it. We put several small plates on the table. They were passing it. They were engaged in conversation. They were having fun at the dinner. It was a fundraiser, and at the end of the day, we raised more money by selling recipes, by selling experiences, by selling the event by the chef coming out and doing a private dinner for 10 or 20 people at their home. The 20-person dinner sold for $50,000. Start to think outside the box. Start to think differently. Everybody has been to the dinner that you've typically gone to year after year after year. Start to look at how these trends within restaurants, food trucks. If you're in Chicago, food trucks are running up and down the street selling gourmet food. They're paying $5 for a cupcake, but it's a great cupcake. But at the end of the day, it's the panache of the cupcake. It's not that that cupcake is so different or so terrific. It's different. It had bacon in it, or it had something else. When you start to look at these big events, you got to remember that there's 9,900 people that have been there, done that, seen it, and that's really who your customers are. The other thing that I do with every big event is I'll sit down with the staff, whether it's BaBaReeba or a big, and I'll go, what was the most successful event you've had? Tell me about the second most successful. Your third. Okay, now put those three together and come back to me with the menu and the experience. People love to do that. The other question I always ask is who's going to be in here before me? Who's going to be here after me? And I try to share in those expenses. For instance, if somebody had the closing night the night before and they brought in $10,000 worth of flowers, why don't I go to them and offer to co-op the cost of the flowers so that the next day I'm using their flowers and we both shared in the cost. Same thing happens when you're talking to the chef. The chef may be preparing a great appetizer for them, but the main course is just average. Go back to him and say, listen, if you bought twice as much of that, do we all save money and do we all share in the economics of what we're doing? Think like an entrepreneur. Think differently. I call it the difference between transactions and transformations. Innovation is the product of discomfort. And the more uncomfortable you are, in solving the problem, the better the experience it is for your meeting and your meeting event attendees.
James, you provided a great platform for us to get into ROI discussions and budgeting. Can you drill down a little bit on budgeting for MICE industry and food events?
I have a very simple formula for all of these questions. What does it cost you to have an unhappy attendee? That's the bottom line. If you've only got $50 for your final night budget, you can't be doing a $200 meal. You can do a fun meal. You can do an interactive meal. So you've got to marry up the ROI. And I refer to ROI a little differently. I call it return on your ideas. You can have a $500 chicken dinner that doesn't go over well, and you can have a $50 barbecue rib outdoor dining smoking experience that everybody loves. So start to figure out what's going to be the most interactive experience, we talked about, education, etc., that your people walk away with. We did an event one time where we couldn't afford the final night. So we took everybody out to another place and we let them order whatever they wanted. In other words, they chose their own menu. Sometimes that's difficult with 10,000 people. But you can do it if you start to pre-plan. You put up food stations. Again, in budgeting, if it's your final night, that's the last impression they have, and that's really where you should have enough money to leave a positive impression.
Thank you, James. Greg, any follow-up comments from your experience?
I think in terms of ROI, there's a lot of changes in the luxury market for sure. Luxury, the definition of that is changing. And in terms of food,
Let me follow up there for 1 second. How is it changing?
it's more accessible to more people. Also, the sense of opulence and exclusivity is shifting into more user-friendly, more experiential, more connectedness among the group. So that idea of exclusivity where you're in a private dining room and there's chandeliers and there's 4 waiters for every person is not really that popular anymore. I think the CEO of Starwood said it best. That was like eating in Batman's cave. People are moving on from that. So I think what we now think in terms of luxury, it's still quality, of course, but it's more accessible, and especially for the younger millennial generations who want a different type of experience, which we talked about before. So a benefit of that is the price is coming down, but also there's more of a focus on creativity. So we mentioned earlier the food trucks or the gastropubs, or what we're seeing now is the next trend is bistronomy, where chefs in Europe are some of the top chefs are creating more casual restaurants, but the level of food is still really high. To start searching out ideas like that, where you can have a top chef or a great chef, but doesn't necessarily have to be such an expensive venue, is one way that you can really impact the ROI and ROE.
Jorge, any comments regarding the opportunities in Spain?
You mean the opportunities for big groups or in general?
In general, in terms of ROI, return on investment, and also ROE, return on experience?
I think Spain has an advantage of that because we have the Mediterranean diet, the fresh produce, and I think it's totally different from the point of view on other countries in Europe. We have a lot of local cuisine, regional and local cuisine, with different and more very known local cuisine. You can start, everybody knows the paella and other dishes, but now more and more in the outside restaurant in our country, they are preparing very, very known dishes inside the country. And I think the advantages in our country is the diet, the Mediterranean diet, and the fresh produce we already have, maybe totally different in other countries in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Mark, any follow-up notes for you?
Again, in general, or in regards
Specifically
to... Okay.
in terms of ROI and ROE?
again, I just think you very much need to have people come away with a different experience than they ever had before. Variety is key. Particularly if you're dealing with smaller groups, obviously it's going to be a little bit more focused. But if you're dealing with larger groups, not to get back on that subject, but you're these days with people's dietary concerns and lifestyle concerns being a little bit more healthy, and also just everyone, in my experience, throughout a given evening at the restaurant, if I have 100 people, which is a terrible night for me, by the way, but if I have 100 people, then chances are 20% of them have some kind of specific dietary restriction. I can't eat this, I can't eat that. If we're doing a big wine dinner where the chef is presenting his specific menu, which normally, if my dad, when he was cooking for a large group of 100 people, and it was his menu, and if someone said, oh, I can't eat this, can I switch it up, my dad would probably come out of the kitchen and kick them out of the restaurant. These days, you're dealing with different clientele, different demographic, where you have to have different options available. You have to be concerned, from my perspective, I have to be concerned with people who have gluten-free diets, who are vegetarians, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to have it doesn't matter how many people you're really taking care of, you need to have something for everyone. You need to have every demographic, gender, age, lifestyle have something that they can kind of lock in on and enjoy and come away with. So I think variety and also touching on certain bases is key as well.
Mark, are you seeing a dramatic rise in the request for gluten-free and vegetarian?
Absolutely, huge increase in that. Again, like I was saying, first of all, well, going back, we've been around for 27 years, and again, when my dad was around in the kitchen, for people to say that they have a gluten-free diet or they can't eat this, can't eat that would have been a foreign thing to him back then. I think Jorge could also relate to this as well. In Spain, for that kind of diet or people having that strict a diet and that gluten-free, et cetera, is foreign. One of the things we do in the restaurant that we're hugely proud of is we have a giant brick wood-burning oven that's every single brick and every single piece is from Madrid. In order to get it fixed, we actually have to fly in a grandfather, a father, and a son to come in and fix the oven from Madrid, so we have to pay for that, which is quite costly. But the point is, we feature that oven, so we bake our own bread there, and we're hugely proud of our bread. And it's something so simple. And then, like I said, on any given evening, I have at least 5% of the guests are gluten-free. Whether they actually have a very serious gluten-free issue, where they're like celiac disease, or if they're just simply trying to cut bread out of their diet, which is more commonly the case, it eliminates something like our bread, which is hard. But you have to have a gluten-free menu available, which is something that a lot of the restaurants, particularly in our company, we definitely do. Vegetarian is huge. Farmers markets are huge social event, which I've even been to meetings that were involved around farmers market festivals, which is a great idea, along with food trucks, also a great idea. But with the farmers markets being so popular in Chicago specifically, you need to have that as a featured thing for your vegetarians. Yes, they can enjoy tomatoes from the market, from the supermarket, I should say, but to get heirloom tomatoes from Nichols Farm in Illinois adds a prestige or adds value to what they're having, and you need that. In the end of the day, you really just need to add value to everything you're doing.
I think you hit on a key word there, and that is value. Let's spin off that a little bit and drill down on the issue of settings or unique settings, and how much does that play into the overall experience, and how important do you see that being? James?
We eat with our eyes. The first thing that we see has to be attractive. It has to be plated well. The table needs to look great. If you saw a dead cockroach on the floor, your entire meal has been put off. It's that simple. It's all about details. It's all about what I refer to as eye candy. You must be able to say, It pleased me visually. It therefore will taste good. So when you start to look at how some of these things are done, once again, if you start talking to the chefs and you don't constrain them and you ask them, how can they do that? You find out very interesting things. We did an event at one of the hotels here, and we were struggling with centerpieces. And I said something very casually. I said, has any of your chefs won any competition? And they said, yes. The pastry chef won the chocolate sculpture contest internationally. And he's very proud of being able to do chocolate sculptures. Well, guess what our centerpiece became? And we raffled it off. Basically, there was a ticket underneath each plate. You got to win it. I say this to you before, and this is kind of my mantra. What am I going to do differently tomorrow that'll get me better results than I got yesterday? It's not about the past, it's about the future, and we have to create our own future. You have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to take a risk. I'm not suggesting you go in with the idea that this is going to fail. But to reach for the stars, you've got to start stepping away from your comfort zone. So if I was going over to Café BaBaReeba, I would get a hold of this gentleman and I would say, if your father was doing it, where would we start? What changes have you made? And if this was your event, all I did was pay the bill. What would that event look like? And by the way, I'm inviting several big dignitaries, so you're going to get one chance to impress them. The other thing is, if the chef in the organization believe that there's some value to who your meeting group is, I've actually seen them come down in price or do extra added value because they want to showcase what it is they do in the hopes that they would get some additional business. So remember, it doesn't hurt to ask. It doesn't hurt to negotiate, and the shoulda, coulda, woulda means you should stop shoulding all over yourself and just do it.
Thank you. Greg, can you recall for us some of the wow expressions you experienced when you walked into a meal function?
Okay, if we're talking about off-site, one would be like, I think El Botín in Madrid is the oldest restaurant in the world. Hemingway said it was his favorite restaurant. I went there, it was years ago. I have no idea what I ate, but I'll never forget that meal because the setting was so, it just blew you away. Anyone who goes to Madrid needs to go to that restaurant, by the way. Last week we were in Stockholm, and this is an example where you're trying to tie the location into the food also, or the food event. Their thing is being out on the archipelago, so we took a boat out to the island and we had a meal. And I don't know if those chefs did anything amazing that any other chef couldn't do, but just being in that environment, the food tasted so much better. We're eating gooseberries that were picked that morning, sort of thing. It's infinite, the amount of creative venues that we've discussed in Prevue. But I think to sort of have an overall theme about it is when we talk with DMO heads, they say, we don't promote our destination of meeting planners. We promote how you can use the destination for meeting planners. And the number one thing is always food. I remember a GM in New Orleans once said to me, no matter how rich or poor or good times or bad times or large group or no matter anybody, everybody loves a good meal. Food brings us together like nothing else. So it's really a matter of innovation and creativity to try and find the most interesting venue for the budget, and that's a challenge.
Let's spin off that, and what about working with hotels? You have a ballroom. What do you do with it?
Well, no, that's a great question too. I know a couple times, especially if it's a chain hotel, Intercontinental has the Intercontinental Kitchen Cookbook, which a dish from all of their restaurants around the world. So if you go to an Intercon, they can create an event where they'll have a chef from Bali, they'll have a chef from Madrid, they'll have a chef from Buenos Aires, creating those individual recipes or dishes, having food from those hotels. And they've worked with the chefs. Sometimes they'll fly the chefs up. A couple weeks ago, we were in New Orleans, and W had a street party, and they had the W London and the W Singapore, the actual chefs from there selling their food. And what's really cool about that, first of all, it's just really interesting to try different food, but you're also getting that destination experience. You're learning about new destinations. So there's a cultural interplay there, which is just fantastic. And any chain hotel can do that.
Anyone else on the panel? What about transforming the environment into a wow?
Nothing changes if nothing changes. Once again, one of the things that I've learned to do, and it's just automatic, is I'll ask who's in there before me, who's in there after me. One of the great things that I did for someone was, when he was alive, I got Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra was in town, and I said, if he'll stay over one extra night, what would it cost me? They said, pick up his room and give him $5,000 and a bottle of wine. It didn't matter whether you liked him or didn't like him. I got Frank Sinatra for practically nothing. Once again, all these things that we're talking about are within the scope of what you do as long as you're willing to open up your vision. And so in parting, as we're closing, I'm going to give you my favorite line of the year. Don't let what you think you know get in the way of learning what you need to know.
Great parting shot. We have a drawing coming up for a $100 American Express gift card. And here we go. Let's see, we'll mix them up a little bit. Okay, the winner is Scott Lee Soul Makeup Inc. Congratulations. I'd like to thank our panel today. We've had a great discussion. Jorge Rubio Navarro, Director, Tourist Office of Spain, Chicago. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Mark Sotelino, General Manager, Café BaBaReeba Restaurant. James Feldman, Shift Happens. I've got to say that correctly so that you get it. Shift. Change Management Expert. And also Greg Oates, and he is with Prevue Magazine, Executive Editor. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for being with us and for you joining us.